I think that's on you. So we'll welcome Andy. Do you want to take yourself off mute?
Done that for you, Soren?
Now then, how are you doing, Andy?
I'm good, bud. Yourself?
Not very, I'm very good, thanks. Thanks for joining us again from sunny South Africa, I take it?
It is sunny. It's a bit cold. It's winter now, but it's about 22, 23 degrees.
Oh, it's not cold.
Cool mornings, cool evenings with nice days.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously we've had you on before. Like I said at the beginning, I cocked up by not recording it. So we've got you on again. So my apologies if we kind of go over some of the same things. But would you like to sort of just give us a quick detailed chat about who you are, what you do, your sort of main job, and then we'll go into the questions again.
Yeah, well, how far do we want to go back?
Right to the beginning.
Yeah, right at the beginning. Well, my journey into whiskey wasn't the typical journey. I mean, I grew up in Yorkshire in the early 60s. And my dream, like most kids back then, was to be a professional footballer. England had won the World Cup, and everybody was at school playing soccer, and that was my kind of dream. I didn't make it as a soccer player, but I managed to become a professional cricketer. And I played for Derbyshire, and one of my teammates was a guy called Peter Kirsten. And to escape a cold English winter in 1982, he suggested me coming back to South Africa. And that's when I first visited this country, and I did that trip 6 months each way for 3 years. And then I settled here, and I got working with a company called Stellenbosch Farmers Winery from October 1984. So I've just completed 35 years, coming up to 36 years with the company. They are now Distel, after merging with Distillers Corporation in 2000. And yeah, it was actually quite interesting then, because as soon as I started working for the company, I was actually in their blending cellar for all spirits. And we had a bulk malt contract with Morrison Bowmore from Scotland. And their directors came to South Africa each year, and I was invited to a social gathering early in 1985. And as the evening progressed and the wine flowed, they came up with this idea about, why don't I come back to Scotland to learn how to make whiskey, which was quite interesting, because I mean, I'd spent 22 years in the UK and never been to Scotland. Now I'm in South Africa for less than 6 months permanently, and I'm being invited back to Scotland to go and learn how to make whiskey. So I thought at the end of the evening that the next day, everybody waking up with headaches, that, that was just liquor talk and it would be forgotten. And my boss called me in and said, listen, we've had this chat and would you be interested? So over the next 4 years, 1985 to 1989, for various periods of time each year, I went across to Morrison's and worked at Glengarry in the Highlands, Auchintosh in the Lowland Distillery, and then on the island of Islay at their iconic Bowmore Distillery. In 1989, Brian sold the business to Suntory. My trips to Scotland stopped. The business in South Africa said I should know enough by now, so they wanted me to head up the whiskey operations, which at that stage were very, very, we only had one commercial whiskey on the market. And my only mandate was to make more whiskey and make it of a better quality than what we had before. So I was pretty much the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. We still are the only commercial whiskey distillery on the continent of Africa. That's 54 countries. The main, what we mean by commercial is that our products are available in most bottle stores in most towns and cities throughout the country. There are a few craft distillers starting to pop up, mainly starting on gin, but with an idea to get to whiskey in a few years' time. But in terms of commercial, yeah, we are still the only one on the continent at this stage. I manage the James Sedgwick Distillery, which is the home of South African whiskey. I managed that for 25 years. And then in 2016, I was asked to take up the role of head of whiskey for Distel, which basically, it's actually the title is Head of Whiskey Intrinsic Excellence. I think there's only HR people can come up with names like that. And what it basically means, I don't have people reporting to me anymore. I just have whiskey. So it was quite a change. I mean, I'm 4 years into that position now. It's been quite a change because you know, when you work so long with a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week operation with people and equipment, and then all of a sudden it's taken away from you. And I still stay on the distillery, so I still hear the same noises. I still, you know, wake up in the night when a pump stops, which should be running. So I haven't got rid of that yet. But yeah, it has been a bit of a change. It started off, I was involved in Scotland initially when we bought the company in 2014, when we bought Burn Stewart Distillers. I was involved a little bit more then than I am now, but that's just purely and simply because we've got probably, you know, one of the best distillery operation teams and blending teams which you could wish for in Scotland. So, you know, really there it's a case of they send me samples, I get the pleasure to taste them and just give a thumbs up, and Stephen and the rest of the team just continue. So it's great knowing that side of the business, because we are quite a way away from each other. It's great to know that side of the business is sorted. So I'm still spending most of my time looking after the Bains and the Three Ships range of whiskies. A lot of that time now is spent on innovation. Exactly what Louise was talking about. That's it, Bains. You've got to drink a bit quicker, Soren. That's the old bottle.
Yeah, I've got
That's the new
two.
kind, yeah.
I've got some of that. Yeah, I've got some in the back room of the new version.
Yeah, but that bottle is 2 years old now, man. How long does it take you to drink a bottle?
How long does it take me?
Yeah.
I've had about 6 bottles of that one.
Oh, okay. You buy by the case. I'll let you off.
And that is the last one of them. So I've got, what have I got? I think I've got 3 bottles of two or three of the new one in there. But obviously it's the same liquid anyway. So
yeah, yes, exactly.
But, I mean, that was one thing I was going to sort of say to you, that, you know, we know you sort of working for the James Sedgwick Distillery. We know sort of Three Ships vaguely, but a lot of us now are knowing you more for the Bains, and which is obviously a brainchild of yours anyway. So would you like to kind of just give us a little insight into how that came about, and, you know, why?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, South Africa is even though our first commercial whiskey was only launched in 1977, so our industry is 43 years old, which in, you know, comparing to Scotland and Ireland with over 500 years of tradition and history, it's nothing. And traditionally, up until, you know, 1995, South Africa had very little whiskey in the country. What there were some of the, let's say, better known blends, very little single malt at that stage. And then after 95, when South Africa joined the global village again, a lot of the whiskey started coming back to South Africa, which had avoided the country through the apartheid years. And what also happened then was that we had a growing, let's say, middle-class market as well, which took a fancy to whiskey. So towards the end of the 90s, whiskey was starting to gain a little bit of a foothold in South Africa. Brandy was by far, we still make some of the world's best brandy in this country. And, you know, brandy was selling around about 35, 36 million liters a year at that stage, and whiskey probably 2 or 3 million. But towards the end of the 90s, it started to become a lot more popular with some of the big brands coming back. And in 1999, I kind of looked at 2 of those brands which were doing incredibly well here, one from Ireland and one from the States, and both began with the letter J. And I kind of looked at those two whiskeys, and I just thought, okay, what makes them so popular with our consumer? And if I look at Irish whiskies, my personal opinion is that they're incredibly soft, they're smooth, they, you know, dangerously easy to drink. But, you know, I kind of lose interest after 1 or 2. I know it's changed a little bit now. There's a lot more, you know, a range of Irish whiskies than what they used to be. I mean, Jamesons themselves have got a vast range now. At that stage, it was just a green bottle. And then I looked at the States, and, you know, the bourbons, to me, again, my opinion is I love the sweet, spicy vanilla toffee notes which come with the bourbons, but I'm not so crazy about the oiliness. Their distillation law allows them to go to 80% ABV on the columns, where ours is the same as Scotland. We can go to 94.8. So we create a cleaner spirit. We can take out some of the congeners which naturally stay in the bourbon spirit. And that's what I decided to do. I thought, well, how can I do it? So I decided to go with a grain spirit, which was pretty unfashionable back then in 1999. But, you know, in South Africa, as I mentioned, we didn't really have a kind of a DNA of what our whiskey was like. Three Ships was typically the Scottish style of whiskey, of blends, single malts, cask finishes. So with, starting with a grain whiskey, nobody was looking at me and saying, but why grain? And I went to the States and we chose First Fill ex-bourbon casks from one of the distilleries there and put our spirit in there, left it for 3 years. Warm climate in South Africa, a lot of interaction taking place very quickly, losing about 4.5 to 5% per year to the angel share. And after 3 years, I was kind of expecting my eureka moment. This is it. This is what I was waiting for. And when we released the whiskey from the cask, it was nice. It was good, but it wasn't that eureka moment. And I kind of thought, well, what am I going to do to get it? Because to leave it in the same cask, as you all know, the extraction is getting less each year, so I wasn't going to gain any more from keeping it in there. So we took the unusual decision of, instead of putting the whiskey into a bottle, we brought in another set of First Fill ex-bourbon casks from the States, same distillery, and we revatted the whiskey into those casks and started looking at it on a 3-monthly basis. And then after an extra 2 years in those casks, I thought I got the profile which I was looking for, and that was Bains. The product was ready to be launched in 2005, 2006, but our business was still trying to stop the whiskey tsunami. They still thought that they could, get brandy to stop this, which unfortunately, or fortunately for whiskey, it hasn't happened, because whiskey is now selling close to 40 million liters a year, and brandy has dropped back to around about 30 million liters a year at the moment. So yeah, we had to hold on a little bit, and that led to the launch of Bains only being in 2009. But what I did from 2005-6, when I knew it wasn't going to be launched, I continued to produce the, let's say, the core mother brand, because we liked what we got. But I took some of that whiskey and I started putting it back into older casks. Didn't want any more of the spicy sweetness coming through. I just wanted it to mellow in our climate. And that led to the 15-year-old. And then the 15-year-old, some of that I took and I put into sherry casks, which led to the 18-year-old in the 3 sherry cask finishes. But the 15 and the 18s are, at this stage, global travel retail exclusives. So yeah, that's a little bit. Since 2009 till now, it's only 11 years, so it's still young for a brand in the industry. Done exceptionally well at international competitions. I know a lot of people, don't place too much value on competitions, but sitting on a few panels myself and knowing that, our whiskeys and all whiskeys are tasted blind, and it really does go about what's inside the glass and not necessarily what label is on the bottle. And yeah, it's done incredibly well, and twice in those last 10 years at the World Whiskey Awards, it got the title of the world's best grain whiskey, which amazing achievement for us. We think in, something which started off as a kind of a category which nobody was really interested in, and grains are starting to come. And again, Louise said it, grains are so easy to work with. They they do tend to take on the nuances of different casks easier, quicker, if you're going in the right direction. Where I like to produce smoky, peaty malts as well, and they're just a little bit more difficult to handle when it comes to choosing what sort of cask you're going to put them into.
Yeah, I mean, one question that has come up, which I think, well, the two that kind of coming together here, and you've kind of almost touched on it anyway, but one of the questions was, what's the difference between Bains and 3 Ships, which you've kind of already said a little bit about, but why did you choose Bains and not just go under the 3 Ships name?
Where the distillery is it's in a town called Wellington. And Wellington sits in the heart of the winelands, but it's also got a very famous mountain pass which rises out of the town. And it was actually the first road which connected the Cape with the inland of South Africa back in 1853, when the pass was completed. And the engineer behind that project was a guy called Andrew Geddes Bain. Now, we've always seen ourselves as being, because people didn't expect whiskey to be made in South Africa. I mean, we're a brandy producing country. we drink copious amounts of wine. Whiskey was to be produced here was just, like a pipe dream. And Three Ships, let's say, pioneered that way by, learning a lot, teaching, a lot of how to handle our climate, how to work with it. And we just thought, let's keep the Three Ships range as it is, and let's go with something different, a grain whiskey instead of a blended whiskey or a single malt. And let's just go with something different. And the whole pass, the synergy of the pass to the town and the pioneering spirit of Andrew Geddes Bain in looking at this mountain range and wanting to create this almost impossible road over it, we thought it'd be a good idea to look at a kind of a diversion of grains to one side, traditional whiskies to the other, and we chose his name to go with it. So that's how the name Bains came around, and why we decided to take that different route. And Bains will always remain a grain whiskey. It won't go, we won't never make a blended whiskey under the Bains name.
So obviously with the Bains, it's made from 100% yellow corn, South African yellow corn.
South African yellow maize.
And you've already teased us with the fact that there's a 15 and 18. I am lucky to have a little bit of the 15 here. Certainly not tried the 18. One question is, obviously, you mentioned, I think the 18 is the Oloroso finish. Is there any plans in using other casks?
Yeah, well, it was 1,900 bottles. I chose 3 casks. There was PX, Oloroso, and Fino. So there are three variants in the 18-year-old. There was only 1,900 bottles of each. It went exclusively to travel retail, predominantly in South Africa, our 2 major airports. And then we kept a little bit back for the distillery for people who do come and visit us, just, to give it a, if you make the effort to visit us, then you can also, everything we do produce, we have a small amount which is available from the distillery as well.
Yeah. And are you using any South African wine casks?
I did with Three Ships in 2016. I launched a 15-year-old blend. We have a range in the Three Ships called the Masters Collection, where each year I'm committed to creating a limited volume, something unique to our country, a first, each year a first. And in 2016, I produced a 15-year-old South African blend, which I finished in Pinotage casks, Pinotage is a South African grape varietal, a red wine grape varietal. So that was the first time I launched with those casks. I've done other experiments, so you can expect some other casks coming soon.
So when you say we can expect some, does that mean we may get some over in Europe and that, or is that just a case of there'll be some on the shelves and you can tease us with them again?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, to give you a bit of a background, Soren, I mean, and this is, if you take the time to Google Distell, Distell is a pretty big company, and whiskey is probably maximum 2 to 3% of the company's business. So it's a bit of the hard yards to try and get them to commit to trying to take something globally when at this stage 85% of the company's business is within South Africa and Africa itself. The rand doesn't lend itself to, which is our currency, it doesn't lend itself to global expeditions. I think we sat at 22 rand to a pound at the moment, which is it's a little bit scary for us if we want to leave our shores. So to launch any sort of a marketing campaign in Europe is difficult, and we brought Bains itself into Europe 2017, I think it was, when I started doing quite a bit of work there. We had to have a 700 ml bottle made, which was a big expense for the brand, but we believed in it, because in South Africa we got a standard 750 ml CL bottle or 750 ml bottle, and also an alcohol of 43. So it's not difficult to bring the alcohol down to 40. You just put a bit more water in, but to have the bottle difference is a big one, and that's why you've not seen Three Ships at this stage.
I mean, one question that we've sort of learnt from a few people, what strength are you putting into cask with your grain?
Yeah, we normally go in at around about 65. We're off the still at 94.3. So then we'll break down with demineralized water to around about 65. And then we go into cask at that. What happens during our maturation here, because we're a warm, dry country, we tend to find that our strength stays pretty stable or increases slightly during maturation. It doesn't decrease like it does in the cooler, moist climates of Ireland and Scotland, for example.
Mm. And I mean, what I like about the Bains is the fact that you've purposely made it to be a drinking whiskey. So you've put it into a first fill bourbon and then re-racked into another first fill bourbon. So it's not like a typical grain where it's been put into some tired old cask and just meant for blending fodder. It's actually meant to be drunk.
Well, it was, you know, right. If I think right back, it was that trying to create that best of two whiskey worlds: the soft, smooth, easy drinking Irish whiskey with the sweet, spicy, vanilla toffee aroma in American bourbons. And if you look at our market in South Africa, our consumer, whereas before pre-95, it was typically your middle-aged to older male. You're now looking in South Africa at a whiskey market which is pretty much the majority within the 25 to 45-year-old age category, with across all demographics, both sexes, probably around about a 65, 35, 70, 30 male-female split. So there's a lot of young female whiskey drinkers too. So I kind of thought that, you know, whiskey being a natural product, water grain yeast, no sugars can be added, no flavorants, you know, to attract somebody into what is maybe seen as an intimidating, masculine environment, which whiskey is anything but. It should be enjoyed by everybody, but it had this kind of label on it to try and get people to cross that barrier. And in a warmer climate like us, and coming from the consumers from a history of RTDs, ready to drinks and alcopops, you know, getting that sweeter aspect into the whiskey would definitely help with the younger palate and the female palate and those people wanting to cross to whiskey. So that was pretty much the crazy thought pattern behind it.
If I could jump in just at the moment, just while you're talking about flavour, I wanted to ask you, Andy, it's great to see you, what's the kind of distillate profile that you're looking for at James Sedgwick? How would you describe it?
In the Three Ships range, Ed, or in the Bains?
In Three Ships, yeah.
In Three Ships. Yeah, three ships, we've got a core range of a 3-year blended whiskey, a 5-year blended whiskey, and then a 10-year-old single malt. That's the core range of Three Ships. The 3-year-old blend is pretty light and fruity. The 5-year-old is something, a lot of the decisions I've made in my 35-year career have been based on emotion. So the time spent on Islay was incredible for me. I mean, I worked with Jim McEwen. He was the manager at Bowmore at that stage. And I kind of fell in love with the island, the people, and of course their whiskies. So when I came back and I was instructed by the company, we only had one whiskey on the market at that stage. The first whiskey I released was in 1992. And that was the 5-year-old Three Ships blended whiskey, which was basically Bowmore malt and South African grain. And so the 5-year-old has got this nice smoky peaty blend coming through. And then the 10-year-old is, each year we release by vintage. So I'm kind of learning along the way there too. That, you know, let's say the first one I released didn't have enough wood influence. So I'm starting to work with each batch now with different wood mixes. So I think within the Three Ships range, you've pretty much got each product takes you on a different voyage. So, you know, if you like something which is soft, smooth, easy to drink, mixable, and you've got the normal blend. If you like something a bit more complex, smoky, you've got the 5-year-old. And our DNA on our single malt is also the smoky root, but not, you know, not a Lafroig, not a Lagavulin, not an Islay root. And then obviously in that Masters collection, I see there's one of the questions about other casks we've used. We started the Masters collection in 2015, and that was with a 10-year-old single malt, single cask, finished in PX, Pedro Jimenez. Then 2016 was the Pinotage cask finish. We skipped 2017 because the marketers were developing a new bottle. And then 2018 was an 8-year-old Oloroso.
Wow.
And then 2019 was a 9-year-old Fino blend, Fino cask finish blend. And then this year in September, we'll release the next one, which will be, it's going to be an 11-year-old of something. Let's put it that way. It will either be a blend or a single malt. I know what it's going to be, but I'm not allowed to tell you.
That's okay. And I know we were talking to Louise earlier about sort of different woods, sort of even about mesquite and things like that. I know that I think you said last time that we spoke that the South African regulations kind of follow the SWA reasonably closely. Is there any wiggle room to be looking at sort of different woods and even maybe any sort of African sort of shrubs or anything like that?
Yeah, our legislation, I mean, I think the Scottish legislation states oak casks, ours states wooden casks. So there is room for using other types of wood. South Africa, Africa itself is not a very good country for growing trees because they grow too quickly, which means they're porous. They don't have a good grain. So I think for maybe innovation, I'll be looking at something. But for core range, we'll probably stick to European American oak and we've got some really good suppliers out of Spain, out of Jerez. So and we work closely with our Scottish team, so it's easy through their economies of scale to pick up on good casks if we need some.
Yeah, I mean even Fino, as you mentioned, is not sort of that common really. So that's quite interesting.
Definitely not, and to be perfectly honest, it's been the finish which has surprised me the most, especially with the 18-year-old Bains single grain which was finished. Most people, if I look at the sales through the airport, most people grab the PX or the Oloroso because you're rightly said, they know those, or they can relate to them being whiskies being finished in them. Fino not so much, but the Fino is out of the three, I think the Fino came out the best actually.
Yeah, I think with the Fino, it's one of those wines that it's certainly less known, and it's a bit like we just received a bottle from Glenmurray, which was a Masala cask, and again the Masala cask is another one that you don't associate a lot of whiskies being finished in or matured in.
Yeah, we did a special last year for. We've only done 3 independent bottlings. We did one one with the boutique company.
Yeah.
A 6-year-old PX, that's right. And then we did one with a company in South Africa called the Private Barrel Company, and that was also a 6-year-old, but that was a Fino. They chose a Fino. How it worked with both boutique and with Private Barrel was, I actually send the guys samples. But they've got no idea what they are. I just number them 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, and they then choose their interest in whichever one it is, and then once the decision is made, that's what we're going with. Then I'll reveal that one. I don't reveal what the others were, and that was interesting that the South African guys who've done a lot of bottlings, the Private Barrel from Scottish and Irish distilleries, they chose the Fino. The boutique guys chose the PX, both blind, and then we did one last year with Mark Pendlebury and Whiskey Brother, who's the probably the premium independent retailer here in South Africa. They're based up in Joburg, which is a 2-hour flight from the Cape, but it's a tremendous little shop and really passionate guys. And we did last year with them a 7-year-old Moscato cask finish, and again that's almost unheard of. I mean, Moscato you don't generally even put into cask. I really had to to search for somebody who'd done that for me to be able to bring one across.
And with so going back to the Bains with the double maturation in first fill bourbon casks, is there any particular type of cask that you're looking for? So like Jack Daniels or Four Roses, or is it just a mixture of?
No, it's what we've done, Soren, because there are other whiskies which I produce as well outside of Three Ships and Bains for our local market with two other brands called Harrier and Knights. Harrier is a big volume brand. It's a blended whiskey with a high grain percentage. So what I've done is we have one specific supplier for Bains, but that pretty much means all your eggs are in one basket. So what I have done, I've brought in casks from other bourbon distilleries and kind of done experiments with those to see, okay, if anything happened to company X, what would I be able to fall back on? And those have been blended into the high volume Harrier blend. So I'm pretty much from one distillery, but I have got, we've got backup. We know what will work if for any reason our supply is cut off or we don't do business with that company for whatever reason.
And so when you're buying cask, do you generally deal with the cooperage then, or is it the actual distillery stroke companies?
Yeah, most of the bourbon countries have got people who look after their wood, their inventory, for the simple reason there's so much of it. I mean, if you remember, bourbon must have a brand new charred cask. So something like Jack has got to get rid of, or which is an 11 million case brand, you're looking at 1 million casks a year, which they've got to get rid of. And that's just one of the bourbon companies. So, it's pretty big business. So most of them, they've got somebody who manages their wood inventory, and you'll work with those people. And really now, most of the time, it's our own cooperage manager who does that part of the business. We work closely together this side. He does the trips around the world for that, and I tend to do more trips now on the marketing and promotional side.
One question that has come up, which I know we've already answered, but so the 15 and the 18 obviously aren't available in the UK, but which airports can we get them? Because obviously it's travel retail. Is it just the ones in South Africa?
I believe there might be some small volumes in the Baltics through, is it Altia? I think it's a Swedish company, Altia. They showed a lot of interest in the Bains, and they took a few cases. I think definitely of the 15-year-old. But into mainland Europe, I don't know how well you know the duty-free market, but there is very little room for making money in that. It really is about brand building, because the airports, their margin is so high that it is about building brand equity when you take something to travel retail, and that's why we chose to do it to our airports in South Africa. Firstly, we don't have enough to go totally global, even though Distell does have a global footprint in airports with Amarula and products like, and our Scottish whiskies. But we chose ours because when you're talking 1,900 bottles, it's impossible to go retail within your country. You're going to upset somebody, and that's the last thing we want to do. Is to have a trade war on our hands, and that was the reason we chose. Take it just outside of our borders. Most people with South Africa being stuck at the tip of Africa, there's a lot of travel goes through our airports. So most people have actually managed to pretty easily get hold of a bottle of the 18 or the 15 if they've wanted it, because somebody else always knows somebody who's traveling to the UK from South Africa.
And would you know anybody in particular that might be coming over to the UK from South Africa pretty soon? Well, not so much pretty soon, but once the airports come out, obviously if you're having a trip to Sheffield, I'm not too far away from there.
Well, as soon as travel opens up, Soren, then I'll be on the very first plane, because I have a family business which needs closure. So I'll be on the first plane as soon as they do open up. But I can put you in touch with 20 guys who fly on a weekly basis between the two countries. I mean, it really is. You will not believe the amount of traffic which goes up and down between the two countries.
I mean, one of the questions that came in, which when you read down the script, it sort of turns into a bit of a laugh. But obviously, somebody's asked us to explain what travel retail is, and then obviously said there's no airports anyway that are still existing. So, you know, I know last time you touched on it about not being able to buy alcohol in South Africa at the moment. Is that still the case?
It is. We're on day 59 of our lockdown, so we still restricted to your premises except for essential shopping, and we're allowed a 3-hour time period between 6 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock in the morning to exercise no more than a 5-kilometer radius from your home, which doesn't really help us in the Cape too much because it now gets daylight here at about 7:45 in the morning, and the temperature is pretty cool before that, before the sun rises. So, you know, you're cramming now everybody into an hour and a half time slot. So it does pretty much look like the London Marathon around most towns. So social distancing is a little bit difficult. But yes, we're still on day 59 now of no liquor sales, no liquor production. We're not allowed to produce anything. We're not allowed to transport it. Also no tobacco sales in that time as well. Needless to say, both industries are still flourishing through black market activities, which is what us as a legit business industry do not want. But for some or other reason, you know, in the beginning we understood it like everybody did, to flatten the curve, and there's certain things you've got to do. You've got to, you know, you've got to have sacrifices with. Our economy is dead. You know, to try and rebuild this economy and not allow e-commerce, to not allow, you know, our industry in particular, which probably employs directly and indirectly close to 750,000 people in this country. We have not sold a bottle of liquor in 59 days. Our company is still, you know, we're one of the biggest companies, so our company is still trying to sustain its 5,000 employees. A lot of the wine farms, a lot of the restaurants, a lot of the, you know, the smaller bars, just like in other parts of the world, I mean, they're down there under, they will not come back, that's for sure.
I mean, I can pretty much guarantee you have sold some bottles, because I know the last time we spoke to you, I think quite a few of us actually nipped online and bought a bottle or two of the Bains. So, and I've just
it actually spiked. It spiked on Amazon. It was picked up by our radar guys in the UK, who kind of said, you know, what's going on here? And Amazon placed another order as well, which was, I was kind of thinking, okay, have you guys got enough stock on that side of the water? Which they do have, so don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, it's sort of funny to us because, you know, I'm sat here thinking you're telling us you can't buy alcohol, and I know from the chat that most of us have, I think most of us are in a lot of trouble for the amount of alcohol we have been buying. There's a lot of nodding of heads now. You know, it's getting harder to explain why there's so many bottles coming through the door. And I know Andy's had quite a few. Obviously, I can see Sam at the top. He's nodding his head. And I'm pretty sure there's quite a few more. Christoph, I know he's bought quite a few bottles recently. You know, and I'm pretty sure Sophie will have, because she's doing shots all the time. So
now, I've been following it on the Circus's timeline. I mean, there's some crazy numbers there about the whiskies you're buying. But great, guy. I mean, it's you know, it's one of the things I'm sure is helping a lot of us get through this, you know, this very difficult period.
Well, this is it. I mean, we're all trying to do our little bit. Obviously, we're putting orders in. I know we just spoke to Ian a few weeks ago at Glenmurray, and you know, most of us bought a bottle from there. And I know you was obviously here when we was asking Louise about a bottle, and I know it'd be impossible to basically get that amount from yourself. But obviously, somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody did ask about us getting a Whisky Circus bottle from Bains or something, but obviously that's going to be quite impossible, especially at the moment.
Yeah, it's something like Louise said. It's not something we do at this stage. We've done those 3 independent bottlings, which have basically been single casks. It's something I'm trying to get the company to open up to the idea of doing corporates, whiskey clubs, doing casks and bottlings for them. No idea at this stage what sort of minimum quantities would be, but obviously I'll keep you posted if if I get off first base, then I'll let you know about that.
I mean, Paul's just sort of said, do we need to start up an independent bottling service? I think we basically have. The amount of whiskies that we're buying, we're keeping most of them in business at the moment. But, it's really strange to think of how other countries are coping and dealing with the lockdown. And what gets me is the fact that, like, we're talking to yourself in South Africa, we're talking to Louise in Ireland, and I know we've got people from France and Norway, I believe. Just trying to see who's in. We've got in Denmark. And all these countries are dealing different, but I think at the moment you're the only one who can't actually go out and buy alcohol.
Yeah, we kind of think it's crazy. It's the reasoning behind it is that it and this is what we said. We understood in the beginning, because when we went through our first period of lockdown, because the reasoning behind it is that alcohol does cause social problems in some areas with some people, and it tends to be over weekends. Those people can occupy beds which would or could have been needed for the pandemic. So that was the whole motive. That was the whole motivation behind, was to try and keep people out of hospital for the wrong reasons, and it kind of worked successfully. And now we've got the hospital beds. South Africa still sits at this time with, I think we're on 370 deaths from COVID. So it's we're saying we haven't hit that peak yet, but yet all of our independent through the different provinces in the country are saying that their medical facilities are now ready. So it seems strange, why the government's still hanging on to this, but it'll all come out in the wash, I'm sure. It's to me, it's sitting on a distillery, I'm one of the fortunate ones, I suppose. I definitely won't run out of whiskey, so I've got more than enough to keep me going as long as they want the lockdown to be. But the problem is, it's the salaries, it's the livelihood, it's the putting food on the table for the people who work in our industry. And the Western Cape, where we are, is predominantly tourism and wine. That's the two big industries down here.
I mean, go on.
Just come back to the whiskey for a second, Andy. You mentioned earlier that your 5-year-old Free Ships blend was pretty much a Bowmore grain blend. Obviously, you're now part of Distell with Bunnahabhain, Deanston and Tobermory. Has that makeup then changed over the years?
Yeah, I think if you talk to any company about their blends, if they're honest with you, they will tell you that most blends have changed over the years. The skill of the blender is to try to make that change as not as noticeable as possible. So yeah, when Suntory took over, they changed Bowmore basically into a case goods company or a case goods brand. So I had to start looking for alternatives, and I did that for a period before we bought Burn Stewart Distillers. And then obviously now I do have access to some of the stocks which we've got there. So the blend it's always evolving. More and more South African malts as my malts have come online, and the style of my malt is matching the way the blend is moving. Then I can replace a few percent of the Scottish influence as well. So yeah, I mean, ultimately the goal will be to eventually get it like the rest of our whiskies to be 100% South African.
Anybody else? Any questions? It's all gone quiet now.
It has, eh? I thought we all gone on mute.
I think they have all gone on mute, yeah. I mean, obviously the last time we spoke, we spoke about the fact of we don't know when any of this is going to end. Have you noticed yourself doing more of these sort of online sessions, or are you doing many masterclasses, or, is that something you're trying to stay away from?
No. I mean, I'm, pretty much got nothing else to do, Soren. I mean, we're stuck on our home. It's not as I can go to the beach for a weekend or something. We're stuck here. So, this sort of thing I enjoy, and I'm open to anybody, who wants to chat to me to chat. I'm doing, I mean, it was crazy this week. I mean, I was in the UK last weekend for the boutique, and then late last Saturday night, I nipped across to the States. Then I was in Germany on Monday, and I've been to Mauritius twice this last week. So the virtual air miles, you know, they're clocking up. Whether or not, you know, the normal as we used to know it will ever come back, I don't know. You know, personally, there's nothing replaces that human touch, that festival, that, you know, hug and a handshake and a clink of a glass. But I think for the foreseeable future, this will probably, you know, be the way of doing things.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's one thing that I've sort of noticed.
We've had some discussions on this about.
Yeah, you know, we sit here and we have a chat and a drink together, but it's very hard to read the room when you've just got a little screen of somebody's in front of you. So you're not getting that personal interaction. And the thing is, obviously, I mean, it's like now we've got sort of 21 people in with us at the moment, and all of a sudden you'll get 2 or 3 people trying to talk, and it's a lot different to being in a room with 2 or 3 people talking. It's kind of confusing, and that's what I miss. It's that, yes, you can still talk to people, yes, you can still talk about the whiskies, but it's that personalization that just isn't there.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, I was joking, you know, the other day to somebody that I could be the first brand, the global brand ambassador who actually never does a whiskey tasting in his year of tenure. You know, it could be that, and it's not the way I want it to be, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I love being involved with people, chatting to people one-on-one.
You get off lightly, Andy.
Sorry, Ed?
You get off lightly, mate.
I mean, that's sort of very similar to what I was, you know, because, I mean, obviously I've been taken on by the English Whiskey Company, and it's quite ironical that the time I get taken on to be their sort of brand ambassador to do the shows, the festivals, is the 1 year God decides to lock us down. You know, I don't know if it's saving everybody else from me or me from everybody else.
Yeah, it's different, eh? It's really different. Yeah, I don't think anybody's got the rock solid answer.
No, I mean, what, you know, obviously I'm not the only person kind of in that situation. I don't know. Christoph, can you tell us any more yet on your position? We've got no sound, Christoph. Plug it in.
Oh, sorry, I was muted both on Zoom and my mic. Can you repeat the question, Sven, please?
No.
Because I understand you wanted my position, but I'm not sure about.
What we were wondering, because obviously, you know, Andy's just said, and I've just said, you know, you take on a position and then we can't get out. You know, just wondering whether you can give us any news on what's happening with you at the moment, or is it still hush hush?
Well, for now, it's still on hiatus. I've discussed with my contacts on the English distillery. I'm not yet officially in relations with, but far from official. I didn't even met their staff yet.
Yeah.
I've never visited them or anything. I was supposed to come back in April. That's what I wanted to do. So for now, I've discussed with my friend there this week actually through Twitter, and obviously it's on hiatus. They won't start anything right now. I can't come visit. I won't be able anyway to organize tastings with liquor shops or do festivals or something, because everything is cancelled, everything is closed down.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely no progress for now on this, both on this and on other professional, how to say that, kind of job targets or target jobs I have right now. So For now, I just have to wait. I have to wait for you guys to go out of lockdown, to don't make a quarantine for foreign people, because as much as I love you guys, I'm not sure I'd want to spend 15 days in quarantine before being able to go anywhere in UK. So I'll have to wait, and that's it. It's okay. I'm coping with it by, as you said earlier, by buying a lot of whiskey and drinking a lot of whiskey. But in fact, not drinking much more than usual. It's a good quantity anyway every day.
I mean, just to make it clear as well, with something you sort of just said a few minutes ago, it's not necessarily the English whiskey distillery that you're coming to see. It's a whiskey distillery in England.
Yes, because as I said, for now, I don't want to give any name.
Yeah.
Because there's no point. I have, for now, honestly, I give this like maybe a 15% chance for it to work out. Because,
no, I mean,
but so that's why. But when I come, I'll go visit that specific distillery, but I'll try to go visit other distilleries.
So
and
basically,
I'll try to meet some of you guys at last. So yeah.
So basically, for the last 5 minutes, you basically just wanted to say no.
Yeah, no progress, exactly. But you know me. Once you give me, when you give me the mic, I won't let you have it back.
Christoph, I hope when you talk to them, you change that flag in the background, brother.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to. Yeah. I suppose I have to change the background, but by the time it happens, maybe it won't be in that room anyway. So
yeah, you need to put a little bit of red on there so it's red, white, and blue.
Yeah. Honestly, it will be making my heart bleed, but because you know the deep love between England and France.
We can vouch for that here as well.
I still haven't forgiven you for burning Joan of Arc, but
you can't give up on the old alliance so quickly, Christoph. You have to keep that alive.
But it's fantastic what whiskey can get out of you and can make you do. So yeah, I guess I'll have to change the flag or put an English flag next to it. I don't know. We'll see.
No, that's fine. I mean, sort of, jumping back to Andy over in South Africa. Obviously, you've said that you've done a couple of single casks for certain companies. Obviously, we know the boutique one. Do we know? Can you tell us if there's any more coming up to boutique or?
At this stage, I'm not aware of any progress. I know when Dave was over here last year, we did have talks to our marketing department, but I don't think there was pen put to paper on them.
No.
So with boutique at this stage, no, I don't believe there is. But I am working on a couple more independents on this side.
Yeah.
I noticed there was also a question from JT about do we have pot stills and column stills here at the distillery. We do. We have 2 pot stills which were commissioned by Forsyths for us. They were installed, they replaced my old stills. They were installed in 2009. And we have a 2-column still for grain spirit, for whiskey. And then we have a 5-column still which I can run then faints through to produce neutral spirit for vodkas or gins. So I hope that answers that question.
And
I think, sorry, I think at the moment you say that you're creating sanitizer or alcohol for sanitizer at the moment is the only thing you're doing. When sort of lockdown, finishes up for you guys, how quickly can you then turn that around to start producing spirit again?
Absolutely, straight away. It's the liquid coming off the stills is basically the liquid which would go into into our whiskey. It's our grain spirit off the still, which is then just taken to another one of our sites close by where glycerine and hydrogen peroxide are added to denature the spirit, and then it's bottled and sent away. So we haven't changed our process at all. We're producing 94.3% spirit, which is then broken down to around about 70%, I think it is, for the sanitizer strength, and then just denatured.
Just on that, Andy, when you fire the stills up again, is there any cleaning involved beforehand?
Well, we clean our grain column probably every 3 weeks. We go solids into the column. We've got a specially designed plate which handles solids very well. It's a patent design on the nutter tray from America, and it's around about 2.5 to 3 weeks before you need to clean that. And then basically it is just a water flush with a little bit of caustic solution, and then water again, and then you're back on spirit. So, at this stage, the column is running. There is no need to clean it, for example, from distilling for sanitizer to distilling back to spirit, because it's exactly the same spirit. We've changed nothing.
Brilliant.
And what sort of tonnage of corn are you going through a year then?
I did this calculation the other day for Sunday. I think we probably around about 8.5 to 9,000 tons a year.
And what is the current conversion from liquid to per ton of corn then?
We work on, let's say, an industry average of 400 liters of alcohol per ton of grain.
All right.
I know South Africa has been did have quite a lot of problems with water supply and droughts and whatnot. Is that a really big problem for you? Because I know other distilleries and gin distilleries have started doing cask strength rather than normal bottling strength. Is that anything that you've come across, or just your opinion on it? I can see you laughing.
No, it's actually a very good question, Sophie. You've got to smile a little bit, because the amount of craft gin distillers they're not really going to sink the ship by how much water they use. So, when they came up with that idea of not breaking it down to 43 to save water, it was a absolutely fantastic marketing move which they made. We had good rains last year, which is, again, strangely enough, rescued us for this year. If it hadn't been now for COVID, which has obviously stopped production in South Africa and at a lot of other places around the world as well. We had our big drought here in the Cape 2017, 2018, and what it forced us to do here at the distillery was look at how we managed our water. And we finished up, we invested heavily as a business in maintaining these scarce resources. So we put in for example, we've always, or since 1995, we've had an anaerobic digester, which has treated our wastewater to get methane gas, which we could bring back into the process. And then that water is at a lower level of COD contamination to be able to send to the municipality, where they can aerate that water further to get it down to a level to go back into the system. What we did 2 years ago, we invested in a reverse osmosis plant, RO plant. So now the water which comes out of the anaerobic digester, instead of going away to the municipality, now goes through the RO plant and comes back into the process as boiler water. Simple reason being, for every kilogram of steam which you use, you need 1 liter of water. So we recover now around about 60 to 65% of our water usage back into the distillery. So yeah, it just made everybody, and it still is strange enough now, how you brush your teeth and the tap runs. It doesn't anymore. You shower in you showered in a plastic bath to catch the water to use that grey water on the plants.
Yeah, the one time that I've been to South Africa, it was during the drought. And that's why I remember it so vividly, and it was really different.
Yeah, all the guest houses and hotels, they took the plugs off the baths.
Yeah.
You know, so you couldn't bath. We were down at the stage to 40 liters of water per person per day.
Yeah, I remember.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that sort of stuck with a trip we did to Scotland, was it last year, Ed, when we went to Mortlach, and they were telling us about the worm tubs, and obviously the temperature was getting very close to having to stop production, and you kind of think, you know, Scotland isn't a country where you think it's going to get too warm to shut down, but obviously South Africa, I take it there is no way you could use a worm tub then.
No, we do. I mean, it's you know, the whole thing about a distillery and needing water is not, you know, lots of people, when we say, oh, you know, we can't produce whiskey, they actually think it's, you know, it's because we haven't got water for producing the whiskey. That's actually the small amount of water.
Yeah, what I mean is, though, obviously in the worm tubs, the water's going to get warmer than it really wants to be to cooling it down.
We use cooling anyway, sorry.
Right.
I mean, there's no ways in this country in fermentations, for example, that you could ferment without coolers on the fermenting tanks. So all our water goes through cooling systems here when it's used, you know, on the outside of the process.
So you are temperature controlling your fermentations then?
Oh yes, yeah, very much so. That was one of the first lessons I learned, being this one-eyed man in the land of the blind and trying to be the king. You cannot distill a good spirit from a bad fermentation.
No, yeah.
And we produced a lot of bad fermentations when I started here because I just didn't understand what was going wrong until you.
Andy, what is your fermentation time, and you know, are you just using distiller's yeast, or have you experimented?
We work specifically with the company way back again in the early 90s when I took over. We were using then normal wine yeasts and brewers yeasts, and I worked with a company called Anchor Yeast, who are now a part of Lallemand, and we developed 2 dried yeast strains. Nice. And so that's what we use now. We know the temperature which those yeasts like to operate in, so we will pitch our fermenters at 28 degrees. Our coolers will kick in at 30 because the initial 24 hours is the production of carbon dioxide and heat as the fermenters really get going. So we will kick in at 30. We let our yeast be as happy as it can be while it's eating up all the sugar. And as soon as the temperature starts to drop again on its own, the coolers will stop and it will finish its fermentation up naturally. And we're talking normally between 72 and 78 hours.
Okay. And do you choose dry yeast just from rather than like a paste, just from a sort of storage perspective?
It is. I cannot to this day, and that's what I mentioned earlier again, although I respect the 500 years of tradition of Scotland and Ireland, I really do think that at times tradition has held both their industries back. And I cannot understand anybody who would not want to work with dried yeast, who would want to work with cream yeasts or wet yeasts. And the chances of something going wrong is just infinitely so much more.
Any of us that have baked bread know exactly that.
No, it's you know, we work very closely with them, and I believe now some distilleries in Scotland are using the yeast which we actually developed. Obviously, they're not patented by us; they're patented by the yeast company. But they are now more and more distilleries in Scotland, especially the smaller distilleries which are starting up are moving towards dried yeast.
Yeah, I mean that's one interesting side of it that I think, to me, it kind of almost needs to be looked at a little bit more. The fact that we all look at Scotland as being the world leader in whiskey. Everybody knows about Scotch. Everybody knows about Scotland producing whiskey, but you kind of do think that they are missing a trick in the fact that they're not moving on. That they seem to be stuck at a level, and that's where they want to sit it instead of innovating to try new things.
Yeah, they're resting on their laurels a bit, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as much as we kind of don't all agree with certain distilleries and things like that, Waterford is a perfect example how they are trying to push the boundaries a little bit further. Whether we agree with it or not, they're innovating things, and you know, they are looking to do something new. And this is kind of what gets my goat a little bit with the Scottish distilleries. Yes, they're producing good whiskey. Yes, you know, we all know what their stuff is, but there's very few of them actually trying to alter what they're doing.
Yeah, I think
that's kind of where the sorry, Andy, right? I think that's probably where the SWA comes in as a bit of a blessing on the curse, because obviously it's there to protect what Scotch is to a degree, but it does kind of limit it from further growth. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is sort of a natural progression that some distilleries could go down quite quickly in terms of production methods and cask management and whatever else, but you've got the cloud of the SWA, I guess, sort of like holding them back, arguably. And I know they're there for a good reason, in a sense. But I think, again, like I said, it is a blessing on a curse, to be fair.
I mean, 100% agree. It's definitely a blessing and a curse for this curse. I think also because you've got so many of these brands and companies that have been around for so long, you don't want to deviate too far from what their sort of profile is. I mean, a lot of the newer ones coming through, I've got more chance of that, and like the new ones in England and Ireland and things like that. But yeah, some of the big names, you know, they're owned by companies that just wanted to protect that profile, if you will.
I just wonder if one day one of the Scottish distilleries, for argument's sake, is going to, instead of calling it Scotch, call it whiskey and go left field with something. Because in theory, if they only want to call it Scotch, they've got to go to the SWA. So you kind of think, well, go slightly left field and don't call it Scotch. Call it whiskey.
I asked that question to the guy in charge of Strathearn before they got bought by Douglas Lang.
Yeah.
Because they'd done a chestnut wood finish, which they had at one of the festivals. And I was saying, well, can you not just sell it as, you know, a different name? But he said even because of what it is, they were kind of tied down as well. Even just calling it, like, you know, something, Scottish Spirit or something was still...
I wonder if you could send the cask to England and bottle it in England. Because I mean, basically that's the rules, isn't it? That if it's going to be called Scotch, it's got to be made, bottled, and you know, everything in Scotland. So if you wanted to I wonder if somebody was brave enough to do it. So, I mean, perfect example, the Glenmurray cider cask. Send it down to England, get it bottled, and sell it again. Just don't put it down as Scotch.
You can imagine that the SWA would complain that, you know, okay, you're saying it's, you know, whiskey rather than Scotch, but if you're going to put your name on it and your location on it, they're going to argue, well, you're in Scotland, so therefore it's Scotch, whether you put it on the bottle or not.
Well, I mean, in theory, it's not Scotch if it's bottled in England, is it?
That's true, yeah.
Grey area.
Yeah. There's probably many people have thought about how to get past some of these things, but
yeah.
But yeah, again,
teaspoon it with some English whiskey.
Yeah, hey.
Teaspoon it with some English whiskey.
Yeah, we'll just call it English. But no, I mean, you know, that's an interesting thing. So, you know, because obviously a company, I suppose, like Three Ships and that, you know, I'm assuming with your whiskies that the whiskey was sent over to Scotland for Boutique to bottle.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so there, you know, obviously it's sold. I mean, we still know it as a South African whiskey. It's just sent elsewhere to be bottled. So, you know, you kind of wonder if that's possible with other companies.
Well, the Bains Green as well. I've got the bottle here. That's obviously bottled in Scotland.
No, actually, I got that question asked to me the other night on, I think it was on Twitter. That was a one-off bottling, and for the simple reason being is that the bottle for Bains actually comes from France. And after 2018, when we won the World's Best Grain Award, there was an uptake in orders, which to get the bottle to South Africa back to the UK would have put us into an out-of-stock situation. So that is the one and only time it has been bottled in Scotland, was for that particular purpose. Yeah. It was easy to get from France to Scotland, the liquid, traveling at the same time, to meet up and get it into the bottle so that we didn't go out of stock.
Yeah, I was going to
something
say, the
obviously we
bottle
can do
I've got
that.
here is produced and bottled in South Africa.
And mine's Scotland.
Yeah,
I like how everyone suddenly started getting the bottles out and they're all like that.
yeah.
So
The new one,
Amazon
this
have the
one-
Scotland stock in
yeah,
basically.
this one is obviously Scotland, but as Andy says, my older version, that's South African. So I suppose in a sense I'm drinking two different whiskies here. I've got a South African one and a Scottish one. I wonder if the taste's different. I'll do a head-to-head.
Oh dear, please.
I do have another question, if that's all right.
Is it about Terroir?
Surprisingly, no, don't say it. I have nothing to hand to shots, so not happening.
You drunk it all.
I just wanted to know, I know your 3 ships is always a single malt, and I guess that's presumably meant to be drunk straight, but your Bains, it's almost like it's so approachable that it can be used in cocktails and it can be used in highballs and things like that. How is it drunk in South Africa?
It's a good question again. Sophie, you've come up with 2 good questions. Bains, again, is one of those whiskies which is incredibly versatile. So, yeah, we have in Camps Bay, we have the Golden Mile, as they call it, which is basically cocktail bars. So if your whiskey doesn't make a good cocktail, you're not going to get into those bars. So Bains ticks those boxes. On a hot day, you know, if you drop me a Twitter message or something with an email, I can send you a long list of cocktails which we've developed with some of the top bartenders over here. But yeah, if you want to mix it, just a simple highball with a ginger ale or soda goes really, really well. Some people enjoy it with appetizer, believe it or not. I think, you know, anything really goes. And you know, I think the time has now passed for the producer to tell the consumer how to drink your product. I think when we started with Bains, we had this whole thing about, because it drinks incredibly well neat, we said that's the only way you can drink it. And we kind of fended the cocktail market and highball market off for a few years, which I think actually damaged our brand in terms of volume and initial seeding into these bars and restaurants, which we're now trying to reverse, because we now accept, our marketing teams, that this is an incredibly versatile product which you can mix, you can drink neat. South Africa being such a warm place, we tend to put a lot of ice with everything, which, you know, as you know, ice with whiskey, ice tends to pull in the flavor. But if you walk into a bar, the first thing the bartender does is he pulls up a glass of ice, and then, you know, he pours your drink in there, and then you sometimes got to embarrass him by saying, sorry, but I didn't want any ice. So ice is something which is really big over here. Even in wine, people will put lots of ice in just because of the temperatures. But yeah, just like you said, cocktails, highballs, Bains just tick all of those boxes.
I mean, it shows what type of group we are. One of us has sort of put a message out saying the grain, Bains grain, is great in espresso as well, espresso martini. I've actually tried it over ice cream, and it's beautiful on ice cream. So, you know, I think we're all just alcoholics here, and we'll just, ice cream. Yep, write that one down, Sophie. Yeah.
You know, sort of what I've done here with a friend of mine who roasts a few coffee beans. We actually made a Bains blend. You know, we put it in the roaster with the beans, and yeah, it was quite interesting. I only smell it because I don't drink coffee, but most of the people, when it came back, they said, you know, yeah, it's a bit powerful, but then that shows you, you know, if you're going to play around with something like that, it doesn't matter what it is, you know, maybe look at the quantities too. A double shot of something in one cocktail might only be a single of something else.
Yeah.
I think that's what's so fantastic about whiskey. It's so subjective. You can have a group of people like yourselves, and, you know, the whole idea is not to get every one of you thinking the same way. It's to have this diverse thought. And, you know, I don't believe there's one whiskey for every occasion. And I think if you're only drinking one whiskey, you're doing yourself a disservice. So, you know, what you guys are doing is great, and long may it continue for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way I look at it, that, you know, whiskey, that's the good thing about whiskey, that it has moved on. It's no longer a drink that's set out for gentlemen after dinner. It's a whiskey for every, you know, there is a whiskey for everybody. There is a time, a place, and a style to drink it any way you want. And one thing that was always drummed into me, and I'm trying to tell people about it the same, is you've bought that whiskey, so you drink it how the hell you want to drink it. It's, you know, we shouldn't be there telling you that you need to add water, or you need to add ice, or you don't add water, you don't add it. You drink it how you want. And, you know, I've spoke to people about this Bains, because obviously, you know, I've poured it on the table a few times when I've done the bloggers table. And the amount of people that have come back to me and said, oh, we've bought it and we've tried it this way, or we've tried it that way. And that's the whole point of it. The fact that you've found a way to drink it that you like, it shows how versatile a whiskey it actually is.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because, you know, it's difficult to, you know, to try and capture a total market with one product. So if it, you know, if you're going to get somebody who might not drink whiskey, but if they can drink it with a mixer, then great. As long as it's done responsibly, you know, go ahead, enjoy it. The more people who enjoy whiskey, the more, you know, the more people we keep in our industry going.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is a great drink. It's like, it goes well, like you touched on before, in a highball. I actually quite like it with tonic. It's quite good with tonic.
Yeah, that's a mix which I haven't tried actually, but a lot of people told me it's good.
It's really nice. It kind of balances out the quite intense quinine, to be honest, with the sweetness. It's really quite good. But whatever you do, Andy, mate, please don't stop making this.
No.
It's brilliant stuff, honestly. I think this is my third bottle in lockdown. Just in lockdown. It's my third bottle in lockdown.
Pound for pound, it must be one of the best out there, to be honest.
Oh, exactly. I can't, honestly. I reviewed it recently, and genuinely, it is a genuinely just good whiskey. No matter what, you know, it's a lot of people see grain in general. I mean, if you look at Scottish grain, you don't tend to see much under 10, 12-year-old, something like that, because in Scotland, obviously, it does take a bit of time for it to mellow out a bit. But that is it's just belting, honestly. It's lovely.
I think the thing is, though, Andy, it's like we said a little bit earlier, most grain distilleries in Scotland are not putting it into first fill bourbon casks.
No, that's true.
And then redoing it again. But one thing that Paul said, which he's put no Coke. Paul, it's my whiskey. If I want to add Coke, I'm adding Coke. And the fact that you tell me that you don't drink it off the table and it's in a glass, mate, you're from Newcastle way. I know how you lot drink.
Drink anything off a table or in a glass, doesn't matter, but you're meant to pour it into a glass. That's polite, isn't it?
Mate, I've been to Newcastle a few times at festivals and I've seen you licking it off the floor.
You haven't seen me doing that, have you?
Have I?
It's not one, not lad.
You might have done, like.
And I mean, you know, it's like, was it the other week we saw how Simon was mixing one of his drinks. We'll not go into the fact that he was adding Marmite and that. But,
yeah, please don't.
Yeah.
Marmite?
Whiskey and Marmite don't go together. I don't think
he actually went through with the Marmite, to be honest, to be fair.
I mean, I love Marmite, but I draw a line under having it in my whiskey, to be honest.
There was one last year, me and Sophie came across, I think it was in New York, and we were laughing at him to start off with. This guy's walking around with a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi Max.
No, yeah.
Oh,
yep.
I can send the photo if you guys need proof. He was very proud of his baby.
Everybody was talking about it, and he's trying some of the best whiskeys you've ever tried and mixing it. And his friends were laughing at him. But see, when me and Sophie actually spoke to him, and he explained that he doesn't like being left out of not drinking whiskey with his friends, and this is his way into it now. Yeah. But he fully understands it with his palate. So whiskey straight, we got him on a couple of them, trying them straight, but his palate is with Pepsi Max, and that's how he drinks it. Yeah. He's not bothered by it. You know, everybody at the show was sort of laughing at the start, and I put my hands up, so was I. But when we spoke to him and got his understanding, it was perfect for him.
Yeah, it was great. He was such a nice guy as well. It was really lovely.
I had the same conversation with him, Jamie, and he came up to me, and I can't remember which dram it was that he wanted, and the first thing he did was pour the Pepsi straight into it, and I kind of said to him, you know, maybe, you know, try it without first, and he just turned around to me and said, look, you know, this is the only way I can tell the difference in whiskies, and he actually started to bring out some of the flavours, even though he'd added the Coke, but that was the point of it. That's how he was used to drinking it.
Yeah, well, he started with our 10-year-old sherry, and then I managed to bring him down to the small batch, and he bought up all the small batch straight. Yeah. I got a message from 2 or 3 weeks later, saying that, yeah, he doesn't drink loads of it, it's neat, but he does drink bits and bobs there.
Yeah.
But he said he appreciated the people at York Festival that spoke to him and went, maybe this is where you might want to start rather than your friends who are on peated whiskey with a high ppm. Try something like this. We can see Andy, he's got his Pepsi Max out here. Was it something
No, but that's the whole point, you know, that you have got to be, you know, and us as brand leaders, we've got to make sure that they feel welcome. The fact that they've got a bottle of Pepsi in their hand or a bottle of Coke or a bottle of ginger ale, you know, the last thing he needs to see is us looking horrified.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%. It was a lesson learned for me. I know those people think, but to clearly be walking around with a 2-litre bottle of Pepsi Max with a smile on his face was just, okay, fair enough then.
But the best thing about it was that bottle of Pepsi Max was actually empty at the end of the night.
It was.
Yeah, he'd obviously had a few drinks.
He's living his best life, isn't he?
Yeah.
Each their own.
But
Yeah, exactly.
what I'm going to do now is, has anybody got any more questions for Andy?
I've not got a question, I've got a statement. I want to appreciate everything that you've said because it's been awesome to talk to you and all your historical knowledge has been great. And I've bought a bottle of Bains whilst we've been talking. So I'm going to be drinking that later on.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, great stuff. I do have a question, but I'll leave till after the recording stops. It's about cricket.
Definitely. Has anybody got a whiskey question for Andy then before I stop the recording?
Yeah, just one.
Yep.
Yeah. Andy, the casks that you bring over, do you transport them whole or broken down? You mentioned.
No, we transport them whole. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's 323 casks in a container. That's what you can actually get inside. Yeah. So they come in whole. Then what we do is we send them to our cooperage where they put them on a hoop driver. Just to make sure they're solid. Then they put them under air pressure to make sure there's no leaks, and then it'll come to the distillery. We fill all our maturation at the distillery is palletized. So except in my little secret store where I've got my special projects going on. So then we will fill the casks. We leave them at ground level for 24 hours. The guys will walk the cask to make sure there's no leakers. Then the forklift will come and they'll stack them away. And once stacked away, that's there's no more inspecting of the cask then. So you've got to make sure it's right before it goes in.
Yep. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks, Alistair.
Right, what I'll do now is, so I'll end the recording. We'll obviously stay behind and have another chat. But once again, just like to say a big thanks to Andy. Really, it's always good talking to you, mate. Thanks very much for coming in and spending a bit of time with us again.
Cheers, Andy.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Ray.
Cheers,
bye.
mate.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.